With the recent release of Elden Ring's Shadow of the Erdtree DLC trailer, many questions have been answered, but of course it wouldn't be a From Software DLC trailer if it didn't also simultaneously pose many new questions. First of all, why have we not yet heard of this Land of Shadow? From other clues within the game as well as the name The Lands Between, clearly there are other lands or realms out there such as the Land of Reeds, Aoche, and the Helfen. So, what is the Land of Shadow then? I had previously speculated that the Shadow of the Erdtree title could be in reference to the dark past behind the rise of Marika and the Erdtree, that the DLC would reveal the dark shadows and secrets not yet revealed about the Erdtree in the base game. Shadow of the Erdtree could also be in reference to a dark version of the Golden Erdtree, maybe even one residing within the realm known as the Helfen, an underworld that has a black steeple that the dead seek out, reminiscent of the Tarnished seeking out the Erdtree in Elden Ring. We now know from a recent interview with Miyazaki that the DLC will indeed elucidate more about Marika and the Erdtree's history, pieces that have been kept from us for quite some time as they didn't fit into the developers' plans for the base game. The Land of Shadow is the land in which Marika first arrived, and whatever she did there must have been horrific if it has been ripped from reality and hidden away by the time the player character starts their journey. While Miyazaki has already stated that Shadow of the Erdtree will show players a new playable map, larger than Limgrave, and will certainly be a hefty DLC, it's still unclear how this Land of Shadow we are transported to connects to the main story, specifically Marika and the Erdtree, as it appears to depict past events, though Miyazaki has stated that Shadow of the Erdtree takes place concurrently with the base game and is not in the past or future, yet will also reveal more about Marika's rise to power and the birth of the Erdtree, which almost seems contradictory at first, though most things aren't straightforward in From Software games. We also know that Shadow of the Erdtree is using world building and plotlines that George R.R. Martin had already written for the game. Thus, this is likely connected to the past, especially as the trailer, and Miyazaki himself, hints at a great and terrible war that occurred in the Land of Shadow, and how it effectively wiped out an entire culture. This culture could have been many things, though a likely candidate may be the culture of adherence to the tree we see in the trailer, the predecessor to the golden illusory Erdtree, and maybe even the Great Tree itself, the tree that we can see in the base game that lies below the golden illusion. This is likely what those not blessed with grace see, and we can see the same stump of the Erdtree's previous incarnation when it's burned away by the frenzied flame. While some seem to think the DLC is still actually taking place in the past, that seems a little bit too straightforward and simple for From Software, especially as Miyazaki has already stated there are plot reasons as to why the Lands Between is disconnected by this particular realm, and perhaps we will get answers as to what the other lands or realms are, or how they connect or once were connected to the Lands Between. After all, that question still remains to this day. The Lands Between what? In the same interview, Miyazaki also said, "There are several reasons that I have employed fragmented storytelling, including in Elden Ring. First, I want the gameplay experience to become the player's story. For that, we don't tell a rigid story in a verbose way. Additionally, we want to leave some of the story to the player's imagination. This ties into making the gameplay experience the player's story as mentioned earlier, and becoming absorbed in filling in the margins with your own imagination is simply fun, I believe." I loved reading that Miyazaki said this, as it feels like an admission that they themselves likely don't always have all of the story fleshed out. And while I'm certain everyone combing the game for clues about hidden lore will no doubt find evidence that may hint or imply of filling in our gaps in knowledge, From Software deliberately crafts these games in such a way to allow for speculation and headcanon to exist alongside the existing story of the game. There will always be hard facts presented in-game, though there are so many gaps that will never get filled in, even after this DLC. Especially as Miyazaki has stated that they have not planned any further expansions for Elden Ring. Though, with that said, I'd like to explore the Land of Shadow and its connection to the Erdtree more in depth. The Erdtree in the trailer, just as in the first teaser image, shows the tree seemingly being strangled by another plant, possibly a vine-like structure, though it's quite reminiscent of a strangler fig, a parasite that saps the nutrients from its host and typically kills them in the end. An interesting detail I'd like to return to is that strangler figs effectively sap even sunlight from the host tree it bonds to when its tendrils have interwoven through a tree's canopy. This is of course fitting with the theory that in some form or another, the Erdtree itself is a parasite, or became the host to a parasite at some point in its history. While the relationship between the Erdtree and the Great Tree is still a bit mysterious, I wonder if the idea of this realm being under Marika's veil, and the strangulation and misshapen nature of the tree denotes power is being sapped from it, particularly its golden glow, as we can see it fading in the center of the tree. Moreover, a new structure has been identified underneath the tree that appears to be capturing the sap of the Erdtree. This, along with the shadow that literally seems to be cast over the land, and this being the land that Marika first stepped foot in, I wonder if this is the true Lands Between, a realm draped in shadow by Marika and the Greater Will, in order to create their own realm of light and order in their own image, as opposed to this primitive land of the Crucible. In the Land of Shadow, we see that omens exist here, and this is an interesting detail to me, as omens are said to be cursed and to have been born with aspects of the Crucible, physical features that would have been praised and seen as a blessing rather than a curse prior to Marika and the Elden Ring. Omens are born without the grace of the Erdtree, thus aspects of the Crucible take its place. And it's clear inhabitants of this Land of Shadow must have been aware of the Crucible in some manner. Though, how can this realm house the Erdtree, seemingly depict a previous point in the history of the Lands Between, as it appears the underground cities have not yet been banished to the depths, and yet it's a realm Miquella and the Tarnished of no renown can enter, though at least for Miquella, at the cost of their physical body. This could lend credence to the idea that the Lands Between exist in some sort of pocket, literally between realities, or between the material and metaphysical planes, which would fit in well with the World Tree symbolism often shown throughout the game and by the Erdtree, as in many depictions of the World Tree, acts as a gateway to different realms or worlds, and often connects the heavens to the depths of the underground, like Yggdrasil in Norse mythology, or the World Tree in Berserk, an inspiration that Miyazaki has identified in the past. This could also help explain why the Land of Shadow appears to be depicting past events, despite Miyazaki clearly stating that the Shadow of the Erdtree takes place at the same time as the base game. And this would align with Mesmer seemingly having disdain for Marika having chosen us as her future consort. While we can't know for certain what is really going on until the DLC, that doesn't mean myself and many others won't keep trying, as Miyazaki has stated that this is a separate realm at least in some regard to that of the base game. It means we can't simply be viewing past events in the Lands Between, and I wonder if we are perhaps seeing the lands that were used to power and fashion the Lands Between we see in-game. We have seen that Marika has the ability to fashion and recreate that which already exists, such as creating a safe haven for the Tarnished, the Round Table Hold, which is a recreation of a fortress that can be found in Leyndell, and may actually hold its roots in the Crucible and Godfrey as the first Elden Lord, though that's not the focus here. So, Marika is able to recreate things in new locations separate from its original set point in space. If we were to extrapolate this ability to Marika having the full power of the Greater Will behind her, perhaps she would have the power to create her own version of the original Lands Between, and their Great Tree that sprung from the Crucible, the primordial form of the tree, when the sacred life-giving trees fought for dominance. It could explain how the Elden Ring could have such immense power over the physical laws of the Lands Between, and why the Elden Ring has not always existed as a source of power, as it's what created the Lands Between as we know it, and why there are aspects of the Land of Shadow not present in the base game, because Marika or the Greater Will did not wish to include them. Maybe this is even why other outer gods have so little influence in the Lands Between, as they were not responsible for its creation, and it could have been even created for the Greater Will to specifically have dominion over its own realm. However, it may be more likely that with the help of the Greater Will in Elden Ring, Marika was able to remove people and places she did not wish to remember, especially ones that would call her rule into question. Knowing that this Land of Shadow was ravaged by Marika, I can't imagine she would want to keep it around if she could choose to seal it away out of sight and out of mind. While Farum Azula may be less clear, we know for certain that the underground cities in the Lands Between were actually once above ground before they were banished for betraying the Greater Will, demonstrating that either Marika or the Greater Will does have the ability to quite literally reshape the structure of the Lands Between, reformatting it as they see fit. It's fascinating that Miyazaki says Marika first arrived in this land, and that the Erdtree was born here, And from this land we can still see and possibly interact with the Erdtree, suggesting these may be aspects of the lands between that were removed and hidden away, which is exactly what Miyazaki has stated, though obviously we don't have all of the details surrounding this major plot development. Is this literally a shadow of the actual Erdtree? Is this the original physical form of the Erdtree? Or could it be the parent tree to the Erdtree from the base game, and that an assault on this tree, like the Shattering did for the Erdtree, spread golden seeds that Marika could have used to plant the Erdtree and imbue it with her own blood? As we have seen elsewhere in game, most notably the Aeonia bloom at the heart of Caelid, sacred plants imbued with blood can produce life that inherits the traits of that blood. Millicent and her sisters are daughters of Melania. However, they were born from the Aeonia bloom, and are all incredibly similar to Melania, having taken on a similar body hair color, and are also afflicted with the scarlet rot. Perhaps Marika, like Miquella did with the Halig tree, cultivated the Erdtree with her own blood, and as a result, the inhabitants of the lands between took on the characteristics of Marika, though that opens up a whole new set of questions. We know that Erdtree burial results in the absorption of the body into the roots of the Erdtree, and this is something both Marika and Miquella wanted to stop, suggesting this is a process that benefits the Greater Will more than anyone else, with the Greater Will being quite hungry for the dead. And I wonder if that's the true purpose of the Greater Will, to create a realm in which life can be infinitely harvested through the Erdtree in Elden Ring to satiate the endless hunger of the god. The lands between may have been bathed in golden light, yet this was an act of deceit to swindle the inhabitants into worship of the tree in Elden Ring, thus partaking in its practice of Erdtree burials and providing a food source for the Greater Will. Beyond this, I believe it's possible the veil we see covering the lands in the trailer, as well as the strangulation and draining of the Erdtree, may suggest the Land of Shadow, or whatever its true name is being sapped of its gold and light produced by its sacred tree. I believe this could explain the presence of aspects of the Crucible remaining so prominently in the lands between, and how even Marika's children could be so greatly afflicted, especially Mohg and Morgott, who are omens, a race we see represented in the Land of Shadow. Could this curse that has befallen denizens of the lands between, and even Marika's own children, could it be that as this world is still connected in some manner to the Land of Shadow, possibly using it as a power source for the Elden Ring, thus meaning aspects of the Land of Shadow such as the omens and misbegotten have bled into the lands between? It's difficult to say, as we still have little to go off of, though I do believe that this realm is meant to be more than just a snapshot of the history of the lands between. It could explain why we have never heard of Mesmer, as he may have been placed or left in the Land of Shadow, though for what reason yet is still unclear. Miyazaki has also claimed Mesmer to have been a hero akin to the other demigod children of Marika that assisted her in attaining power. Thus, it's interesting he would have been hidden away in such a realm unless there was a certain purpose. Could Mesmer be preventing the Land of Shadow from returning to the lands between? It may not be that simple, as that could imply the Land of Shadow would return to the lands between upon Mesmer's defeat, yet Miyazaki also stated there wouldn't be any new endings to the game, so that does unfortunately seem unlikely. Instead, Mesmer could be protecting the truth about Marika and the Erdtree, and felling Mesmer will allow the Tarnished to become even more knowledgeable than Gideon the All-Knowing. Earlier I mentioned that Strangler Figs sap the sunlight from their host tree, and I believe that this is what the Erdtree or Elden Ring could be doing with this Shadow Tree, as it may be the original tree, or it may be the physical one that produces the Gold of Grace, and this grace continues to be sapped from its source and funneled into the lands between, all originally to satiate the hunger of the Greater Will. We can see the golden sap is being drained from the tree, and what purpose would this serve, if not one similar to Miquella's attempt to drain the sun of its gold, an attempt to create a golden, sacred, life-giving tree that could control the laws of the lands. And that's exactly what Marika and the Greater Will accomplished, all at the cost of untold lives, and possibly many of Marika's children, though that's for another day. If you have any other ideas or insights, go ahead and drop them in the comments below. I may even feature you in a future video. I love reading other people's thoughts and ideas on the lore of this game and nerding out with all of you. Do you think I'm onto something here? Do you think I'm crazy? I don't know. I'm just trying to go off of what Miyazaki said, and I'm trying to just go off of all the information that I already know about the game and what I've seen in the trailer, and we'll just kind of figure it out as we go, but obviously we're going to learn a lot more in the coming months. Well, I'll see you next time.